Hi students, welcome back to the biology session. So today we are going to learn a new chapter, namely organisms and population under the unit of ecology. So let us take a small introduction about the ecology terminology first of all. So what is ecology exactly? So ecology is a branch of science which deals with the interactions and relationships between living organisms and their surroundings. So this is what the definition we can give for the terminology ecology. So it is a branch of science which deals with the study of interactions or relationships between living organisms and their surroundings. So here the surroundings are nothing but simply to understand environment. So just a small example what we are going to learn exactly is, so let us say there is a plant. Okay, so around the plant there are some environment and environmental factors like light, temperature, soil, water, etc. etc. So what are all the interactions of this living organism? Plant is a living organism. So what are all the interactions or relationships of this plant with the surrounding factors? So that is what generally we understand it as ecology. Okay, study of interactions and relationships between living organisms and their surroundings. Okay, so now the next thing to understand how the environment is built. Okay, from which level to which level how the environment is built. So for that, let us try to understand the levels of organization first. So what are the levels of organization? So generally the total environment on the earth, okay, the total environment on the earth, let us consider it as biosphere. Okay, so bio, living, sphere, globe. Okay, so sphere, globe, spherical shape, round shape or round shape or rectangular. Okay, so living round shaped environment. Okay, so now let us try to understand how this biosphere is built from the lowest level of organization to up to the highest category, that is biosphere. So now let us say micro and macro molecules. Micro and macro molecules. So if you remember from your first year chapters, so biomolecules, so there we learned different types of micro and macro molecules. For example, DNA and RNA, amino acids, protein structures. So all such type of micro and macro molecules together, they construct something called as cells. Okay, and these cells, from here we know the chain very well. So the group of cells becomes tissues, and group of tissues becomes organs, and group of organs become organ system, and up to here. Okay, so from micro and macro molecules to up to an organ system, which going to give rise to an organism, is generally considered as lower level of organization. Lower level of organization, from micro and macro molecules to up to organism. Okay, so now the group of organisms will be giving rise to population. Group of organisms into population, and group of population into communities, and group of communities into ecosystem, and group of ecosystems into biomes, and group of biomes hold together gives rise to biosphere. Okay, so from here, okay, from this point, organism, the total these developments are called as higher level of organization. Okay, so if we look at this, we started from micro and macro molecules and we ended with the biosphere. So the development of biosphere is starting from this lowest level of category, that is micro and macro molecules, and the chain goes on like this, and it is going to end with this highest category, that is biosphere. Means in general, we can understand it as total environment. Okay. So if we observe this terminology, higher level organization, so organisms, group of organisms giving rise to population. So population is nothing but which talks about the number. Okay. So how many organisms are there? So next, population is giving rise to communities. So similar type of populations are called as communities. Now these communities are accommodated. These communities are accommodated in ecosystem. So ecosystem also we done already, right? So ecosystem, to understand simply, terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem, right? Then such type of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems are again placed under biomes. So now what are biomes means? For example, terrestrial ecosystem, a biome, well set biome is, let us say desert. It is a biome. Desert is one biome. And aquatic, let us say sea or ocean or any water body. Okay, it is one type of biome. So all these different types of biomes like desert, sea or ocean, tundra regions where ice is present, much more. Okay, so all those type of different types of biomes again lead to the biosphere. So now in this biosphere, how a living organism will be interacting with some factors. Okay, so those factors, a living organism which is going to interact with its surroundings, and those factors here are divided into two types of factors. So one factor type is called as abiotic factors. Okay, where living organisms are going to interact with two different types of factors. So one type of factors are abiotic factors, and another type of factor is called as biotic factor. So if we observe this terminology, abiotic, okay, so A, that indicates absence, bio, life. Okay, so here we are going to talk about the factors which are lifeless ones. Okay, which are lifeless ones are abiotic factors, and biotic, that name itself, it is very clear, bio, lifeful. Okay, so these ones are lifeful factors and these are lifeless factors. So if we observe what are the abiotic factors, the first one stands here is temperature, the second one is water, then third one is light, and the fourth one is soil. Okay, so these are the four major abiotic factors: temperature, water, light, and soil. Then coming to biotic. So biotic starts with predation, pathogen, parasite. Okay, predation, pathogen, parasite, and the final one is competition. Okay, so predation, pathogen, parasite, and competition. These are the four biotic factors. Okay, and these are the abiotic factors. So now we will be discussing about the abiotic factors. So how a living organism is going to interact with this abiotic factors. Okay, so the next thing to understand, the next topic is organism and its environment. So under this organism and its environment, so just now we see there are different types of ecosystems and there are different types of biomes, right? So under ecosystems we talked about terrestrial ecosystems, aquatic ecosystems, and under biomes we have given some type of examples like deserts, seas, oceans. Okay, so like that, how an organism will be keep on interacting with its environment, let us see here. So here let us talk something about the solar system. The main source is sun, and around the sun, so all of us know our planet Earth keeps on revolving. So let us say this is our planet Earth. So it will keep on revolving itself, and also it keeps on revolving around the sun, right? So all of us know very well about these things. And because of this rotatory system, revolving system, what takes place is the most important thing here, that is seasonal changes. Okay, so because of these things, okay, this revolutionary system, this revolting system, what is the main thing we need to observe is seasonal changes. So the keep on changing of seasons from summer to winter or winter to rainy season. Okay, so with this, what we can observe here, the environment, the surroundings of the organism are not constant. Okay, so there will be summer season, and again there will be rainy season, and after that there will be winter season. That means the surroundings of the organism will be keep on changing, and because of those changes, even living organism also should go for some adaptations. That is the main point you need to understand here. Okay, living organism should go for some adaptations due to the surroundings which are keep on changing due to the seasonal changes. So what are adaptations? So to simply understand what are adaptations in the sense, there are some changes or some modification. Okay, adaptations means some changes or modification wanted. Okay, wanted modification, purposeful modification for better survival and reproduction of living organisms. So why they need to adapt it for something new? Okay, so why they want to show adaptations means for better survival and also for reproduction. Okay, so now let us try to understand how the rate of temperature and the rate of precipitation will be acting in different types of biomes, so that we can have an idea how a living organism will be going for different types of adaptations based on the changes happening in the surroundings. Okay, so there is some small graph to understand about the changes here. So let us draw the graph to understand the changes happening in the various biomes. So in this graph, so on this axis I am going to write about mean annual precipitation, so which is measured in centimeters. Okay, I denote it as cm. And on this y-axis, so I am going to mention it as mean temperature, which is measured in degree Celsius. Okay, so short form, this is MAT, M-A-T, mean annual temperature, mean annual temperature, and this is MAP, that is mean annual precipitation, mean annual precipitation, MAP, and mean annual temperature. So this is measured in degree Celsius and this is measured in centimeters. So now remember precipitation. So precipitation, here I am going to talk about the amount or quantity of rainfall in a year. Okay, so generally this mean is a statistical term, okay, which comes under the subject statistics. So mean means average. Okay, to understand what is mean means average. So in 1 year, what would be the average rainfall? Okay, so remember precipitation means we are going to talk about rainfall. So how much of rainfall in a year? An average. On average, ಎಷ್ಟು rainfall ಆಗಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಾವು ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ mean annual precipitation ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. Okay, so remember the next thing, precipitation includes both rainfall and also snowfall. Both rainfall and snowfall, because in tundra regions, if you go to tundra regions, there instead of rain, snowfall will be taking place, right? So that's why here precipitation includes both the rainfall and also snowfall. Is it clear? Okay, so precipitation includes rainfall and snowfall. Now talking about the temperatures, so here also again same, mean, average. So in 1 year, what would be the average temperature in various types of biomes like desert, tundra regions, deciduous forest, etc., etc. Okay, so now let us try to put values here. So I am starting with 0. If we consider tundra regions where the temperatures will be below the 0, okay, like -5, -10, -15, right? So I am going to write -5, -10 and -15 like this. Okay, and above the 0, the normal temperatures. So 5, 10, 15, 20 and 25. So even this may go up to 50 degrees Celsius also. Okay, in summers generally we will be facing more than 40 degrees Celsius of heat also, right? So this one may go up to 50 degrees Celsius also. Okay, so now coming to this axis, precipitation. So we need to measure them in centimeters. So I am starting with the 50 centimeters. Okay, 100, 150, 200, 250, and it goes on up to 450 like this. Okay, so if we observe different biomes and their average temperatures and average rainfall or snowfall. So here comes the first one. Let me say the tundra and alpine region. Okay, so the Arctic and alpine region. So always the temperature will be less than 0. Okay, less than 0. So -5, -10, -15, and average snowfall will be around 150 or something like that. So this is Arctic and alpine region. So generally this biome is nothing but tundra biome. Okay, so like that, if we plot the graph, okay, so we will be seeing here desert as one of the biome. Okay, then tropical forest, coniferous forest, and deciduous forest. So these are the different types of biomes. So totally the graph talks about 5 different types of biomes. So Arctic and alpine and coniferous forest, tropical forest, deciduous forest and desert. Okay. So there is some graph defining the range of rainfall and the range of temperature. Okay. So this is not much important to remember, but just try to remember 2 particular things in this graph. From this graph, 2 important things. That is, one thing is lowest temperature. Okay, lowest temperature is always seen in this biome, Arctic and alpine tundra biome. Lowest temperature around from -11 degrees Celsius to -20 degrees Celsius. So this is one more important point to remember, lowest temperature. And highest rainfall, okay, highest rainfall, that is taking place in this deciduous forest. Highest rainfall taking place in deciduous forest around 450 centimeters per year. 450 centimeters of rainfall in case of this deciduous forest per year. Okay. So this graph now tells us there is a lot of variations in the temperatures and also in the amount of rainfalls. That means the living organisms which live in these biomes should definitely go for some adaptations, changes, modifications to tolerate the changes in the temperatures or the range of rainfall. Okay, so for tolerating these, their living organisms should go for some adaptations for their better survival and also reproduction. So if they just survive, that is not enough. They need to produce the next generation. Okay. So even that is also important factor. Okay. So this graph tells us 2 things. That is, organism should go for adaptations, and that adaptations are for their better survival and reproduction. And the variations in the temperature and the variations in the rainfall are considered here as influencing factors for adaptations. Okay. Now we will be moving back to our abiotic factors which are influencing the living organisms. Now we will be starting with the abiotic factor. First abiotic factor, that is temperature. So the first abiotic factor, temperature. So first thing, remember there is something called as optimum temperature. So now what is this optimum temperature and how it acts an enzyme activity? Okay. So to understand this optimum temperature, let me give you a general example. So suppose let us say there is a room and that room is locked with some lock. Okay. And to open this lock, we use any key. Okay. Isn't it? So we cannot use any key, whatever we get into our hands. We can open this lock only the key which can open this lock. Okay, so we cannot use any key for opening that lock to open that room. Okay, that means this is the perfect one. Simply to say optimum. Okay. So generally, if you remember from your if you remember from your first year biomolecules topics, all the enzymes possess some optimum temperature for their activity. So ಒಂದು ಎಂಜೈಮ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇನಿಷಿಯೇಟ್ ಆಗಬೇಕು, ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ there should be some optimum temperature. Just like this. If this lock has to open, we need to insert particular key, not any key. So if we place some byte key, will it open? No, never. Okay, if we place some Almara key for this clock, it will never open. It will open when we insert appropriate key. So that is what generally called, we can understand optimum temperature. For the initiation, for the activation of enzyme, there will be some optimum temperature. It may be anything. Okay, so it may be 10 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Celsius or 30 degrees Celsius. So each enzyme will have some optimum value of temperature for its activation. So without temperature, there are no enzyme activations. If enzymes are not activated, then inside the living organism, the cellular metabolisms are going to stop. If cellular metabolisms of living organisms are stopped, then that makes a threat to the life of living organisms. Okay, so that is the first point to remember about temperature. So optimum temperatures are required for the enzyme activities. Then temperatures may be sub-zero. Okay, what is the meaning of sub-zero? Means below 0 degrees Celsius. Just now we seen in the graph about that alpine and Arctic region. There the minimum temperature is minus 11 degrees Celsius. So temperature may be sub-zero and even it may go up to 50 plus degrees Celsius. Okay, so temperature may sub-zero and it may also go more than 50 plus degrees Celsius. And here an important point to remember. So in extreme conditions, in extreme temperature conditions also, some bacteria in extreme temperature conditions also they can live very comfortable. So if we talk about the thermal vents or hot springs where the temperature is around 100 degrees Celsius, so even such type of extreme hot conditions, bacteria lives very comfortable. Okay, so if you remember bacteria, mainly Archaebacteria. So under that Archaebacteria, okay, so under that Archaebacteria, in our first year syllabus we learnt about that. Okay, so Archaebacteria will be residing in a thermal vents, hot springs where the temperature will be around 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, so now let us try to understand two terminologies: eurythermal organisms and stenothermal organisms. Eurythermal and stenothermal, very important. Many times asked 1 mark and 2 mark question. Okay, differentiate eurythermal and stenothermal organisms, or define eurythermal, define stenothermal. They may ask for 1 mark also. So now what is a eurythermal organisms? So here organisms can tolerate wide range of temperatures. Okay, organisms which have tolerate for wide range of temperatures. So the best examples are ourselves, human beings, and surrounding animals of humans, like domestic animals like cat, dog, cow, etc. Okay, so eurythermal means organism which have capacity or tolerance in wide range of temperatures. Okay. Now let us try to understand what is this statement exactly. So let us say in a city, generally 20 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius is the normal temperature. Okay. In non-summer times. Okay, in non-summer seasons, let us say some 20 to 25 degrees Celsius temperature is there. And in the same city, okay, when these temperatures are going to rise up to 35 to 40. Okay, 35 to 40, then these human beings present in the city are facing the lowest temperatures. At the same time, when summer season is coming up, the same human beings present in the city are again being adjustable, okay, being adopting the highest range of temperatures also. So if you observe, what was the initial value here? 20 degrees Celsius. Okay, what was the maximum value here? 40 degrees Celsius. Is it not a wide range? 20 to 40 means almost all there is a gap of 20 more units there, right? So this is what we can understand as organisms. If they have tolerance in wide range of temperatures, such organisms are eurythermal organisms. Okay, organisms can tolerate of wide range of temperatures. So the best examples are human beings and their surrounding animals like cat, dog, cow, etc., etc. And even you can insert plants also here. Even plants also surroundings of human beings only, right? Okay. Now the next terminology, stenothermal. Okay, so stenothermal here, animals or organisms will be tolerable only for narrow range of temperatures. Okay, so narrow range of temperature. So narrow itself talks us, gives us meaning very less space. Narrow means narrow. What is the meaning? Less space. So that means, let us say 20 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius is a normal temperature. So just above the 25, maybe around up to 28 degrees Celsius, they might adjust. Okay, but if the temperature still goes high, okay, if the temperature goes still high than this 28 degrees Celsius, then those organisms cannot tolerate such a change in temperature and they may die also. Okay, or they may lose fertility. Okay, such type of some threats will be there to the generations. So this is what stenothermal organisms. So narrow range tolerance will be there for organisms. And here comes examples, as we can take examples of some few insects and few reptiles. Okay, few insects and few reptiles, they will be stenothermal. Okay, narrow range of temperature tolerance is observed in them. Okay, so this is what about temperature. So optimum temperature for enzyme activities, and temperature may be a sub-zero one or it may go even higher than 50 degrees Celsius. And one of the best example, bacteria which lives in thermal vents or hot water springs where temperature is 100 degrees Celsius. The best example is Archaebacteria. And we again understood all the organisms into two different types as eurythermal organisms and stenothermal organisms. Now, moving on to the next abiotic factor, that is the next factor is water. Okay, so now coming to water, it is raw material of photosynthesis. Okay, it is a raw material of photosynthesis. So if you just try to recall the photosynthesis equation, that equation clearly tells us what is the significance of water in photosynthesis, right? So carbon dioxide along with water. So do you remember the equation? So 6CO2 plus H2O, right? So H2O plays a significant role in the photosynthesis. Then again, in case of enzymes, all of them, these enzymes, all of them require water. Okay, so enzymes require aquatic medium. The reason is almost all the enzymes are hydrolytic in nature. So without water acting as a medium to transport these enzymes, so no enzyme is going to reach the particular location. So here aquatic medium is need to be provided by water. So all the enzymes are hydrolytic in nature. Then another important, water plays a significant role in two things. Okay, in transportation of food and in the elimination of waste materials. Okay, so water plays two important roles. One, in transportation of food. Two, in the elimination of waste materials. So if we talk about the transportation of food, so all of us learned about transportation in plants. Do you remember? Okay, so in that transportation in plants, we learned something called as a bulk flow hypothesis or mass flow hypothesis. So where water is playing a crucial role in transporting the food substances to all the parts of plant body. Okay, so in the same manner, if we talk how it removes or how it eliminates the waste materials, so here let us take, so first of all, food in case of plants. Okay, so bulk flow hypothesis, and waste in case of human beings. Okay, so in human beings, the blood contains plasma, and this plasma major component is nothing but water. Okay, so even in human beings also, plasma is very, very important. It is a component of blood, and that plasma major component is nothing but water again. And talking about the elimination part, so nitrogenous waste like ammonia and urea, these are dissolved in water and eliminated out of the body in the form of urine. Okay, so nitrogenous waste like ammonia and urea dissolves in water, and that will be eliminated outside in the form of urine. So with these major examples, basic examples, we can understand the role of water in transportation of food and also in the elimination of waste materials from body. Okay, now if we talk about the desert area plants, especially succulents like opuntia, cactus. Okay, so in those plants where the desert area have very less availability of water resources. So in such conditions, what they do, plants which are grow in these areas, they will be absorbing water and preserving that absorbed water for future uses. So there again, water plays a major role in influencing those plants. Okay, so if you remember plants like Opuntia. Okay, in case of Opuntia, leaves are modified into spines. Okay, to prevent transpiration process, to prevent the loss of water. Okay, so is this kind of adaptation? So here in desert areas, because of the scarcity of water, so that water factor, scarcity of water factor influencing these plants to go for this type of adaptation. Okay. Now, the next thing about water, how it is going to store and which type of water will be absorbed by the roots of plants. So let us say about the absorption of water from soil. So water which is present in soil, okay, water which is present in soil generally called as pollard. Okay, so water present in soil which is called as pollard, and this pollard again divided into two parts as crescent and echard. Crescent and echard. So this crescent, water available, okay, water available for the absorption of plants. So that particular part is called crescent. And echard, water which is not available for absorption of plants is called as echard. Okay. Now, under this crescent, the most important one to remember, capillary water. Very, very important, capillary water. So, this capillary water is actually present in the soil particles, crevices. Okay? So, water present in the soil particles, crevices. Crevices means some small gaps. Okay, some small gaps in between soil particles. So there water is stored, and that water can easily absorbed by the roots of plants. So such water is called as capillary water. Okay. Then these type of storages, there are some more types. So let us say, after capillary water, gravitational water. Okay, gravitational water. So here water will be moving into the deeper layers of soil, and it will be not available for the absorption of plants and reaches the water table. Okay, so here gravitational water in the sense water which moves to the deeper layers of soil, and that water will be reaching the water table, and that water is not available for the absorption of plants. Then there is something called as hygroscopic water. Hygroscopic water. So generally what happens, if the surface of soil is wet, okay, if the surface of soil is wet, then the moisture absorbed, the water absorbed from the surface of soil is generally called as hygroscopic water. Okay, so water absorbed from the surface of soil. So this is what called as hygroscopic water. Okay. Then there are two more forms of water, like water in form of crystallization. So directly to simply understand this water in crystallization, is nothing but ice form. Okay. Then another type is called as runoff water. Okay. So a floating, a continuous stream of water. Okay. So these types of different types of water we can observe in the environment. So capillary water, gravitational water, hygroscopic water, water in the form of crystallization, and runoff water. Among all these types, only two types will be able to absorb by the plants, that is capillary water and hygroscopic water. Capillary water and hygroscopic water. Only these two types of water are able to absorb by the roots of plants. Then, moving to another important point under water. So, for aquatic organisms, which spend their entire life from birth to death, so their entire life cycle is being spent in this aquatic region. It may be any type of water body, from a small pond or lake to a larger ocean or sea. Okay, so for the betterment, for the well life, okay, for good life of aquatic organisms, water should show two factors. One thing is chemical composition and maintenance of pH. Okay, so these two factors, chemical composition and pH, will be playing a major role in the well maintenance of aquatic bodies. So, if these two things are maintained properly by the nature, then aquatic organisms living in those water bodies will have good life. Now, the next thing under water is salinity, the concentration of salts. So salinity, which talks about the concentration of salts in the water. Okay. So generally, here let us take three different conditions. So the first condition, less than 5%, which is seen or observed in freshwater bodies. Sometimes they are also mentioned as inland waters. Inland waters are freshwater bodies less than 5%. 30-35% in marine waters like the sea or ocean. And more than, greater than 100% in hypersaline lagoons. Okay, so less than 5% in freshwater or inland waters, the concentration of salts, and 30-35% in case of sea or ocean, and more than 100% in case of hypersaline lagoons. So lagoons again nothing but some larger than lakes. Okay, so lakes ginta doddigiddre adana lagoons antivi. So hypersaline, hyper means more concentration of salt. That's why I mentioned more than, greater than 100. And the most important, remember, salinity units are parts per 1000. So the concentration of salt is measured and given units are parts per 1000. So in the 5%, 30-35% of the rate. So actually we should say 5 parts per 1000. That means 5 by 1000. That is the concentration of salt in case of this fresh water. Okay. So now based on these various concentrations again, we divided animals into two types. That is uric halide, okay, and stenohalide. Uric halide and stenohalide. So just like urethermal and stenothermal, here uric halide and stenohalide. Even the statements also remains same. So uric halide, wide range of salinity tolerance. Organisms have tolerance against the wide range of salinity concentrations. And stenohalide, okay, stenohalide, organisms have tolerance to the narrow range of salt concentrations. So remember, uric halide means organisms tolerate to wide range of salinity, and stenohalide organisms tolerate to narrow range of salinity. Okay, so even this uric halide and stenohalide, against these two terms are also very important. 1 mark or 2 mark, they may come up as questions. So this is all the things about water. Okay, so under water we discussed what is the importance of water, and in the absence of water what is going to happen, and if water salinity concentration varies, then what could be the types of organisms in the different salt concentrations as uric halide and stenohalide. So here examples of uric halide and stenohalide. So in case of uric halide, major migratory fishes like salmon, and here many freshwater and also marine water fishes are example. Many freshwater fishes and marine water fishes. So in strategies chapter, strategies for food enhancement and crops, in that lesson we discussed many examples, freshwater like the mackerel, pomfret, hilsa, etc. We discussed under both the freshwater and marine water forms. Okay, so this is about water. Then after water, the third abiotic factor is light. So this is the next abiotic factor, light. So this is also one of the most important factor required for photosynthesis. Okay. So without the presence of light, there is no photosynthesis. If there is no photosynthesis, there is no primary productivity. So when there is no primary productivity, so the total ecosystem is going to lapse. Okay. So that's how light is playing a major role in photosynthesis. And one of the end product of photosynthesis, that is oxygen. Okay, so the liberation of oxygen is depending on light. So oxygen is required for the breath of all the living organisms. So for the liberation of oxygen, photosynthesis need to take place. If photosynthesis need to happen, light is a must and And coming to light, there is something called as photoperiodism. Okay, so this photoperiodism which influences the flowering character of plants. So in the presence of sunlight. So if you remember from plant growth and development chapter, okay, we talked about long day plants, short day plants and neutral day plants. Okay, so there this photoperiodism, the duration of sunlight will be induced in the flowering character there. So in that factor, light is also essential. Then it is important for birds, generally in poultry for egg laying. Okay, so this light is important for birds which are residing in poultries, okay, for egg laying process. Then the behavior of animals is also again depending on light. So that is nocturnal and diurnal behavior. Nocturnal means animals which are active during night times in the absence of light. So if that animal has to behave, if that animal has to respond, then it should know about light, isn't it? In the absence of light only that animal become active. That is nocturnal. And animals which are active during the daytime, we call them as diurnal, right? So again, light is playing an important factor in the behavior of animals. Okay, so this is how light will be influencing different types of organisms. And even in the case of oceans, so after 500 feet, light cannot penetrate up to there. Okay, after 500 feet depth into the oceans, light cannot penetrate into the deeper layers of oceans. So there again, this nocturnal conditions are present. So in nocturnal conditions, don't we see the life and don't we see the activities of life? Means yes, you can see. So here again, this is a best example to explain the nocturnal conditions. Okay, so this is a small account of light. Okay, so how the light is going to influence the organisms. Okay, and how interactions are happening with light. Then moving on to the last abiotic factor, that is soil. So here, regarding soil, we need to understand something about soil particles. Okay, how they are arranged, in which manner they are arranged. Okay, and the presence of air in them and water in those soil particles. Okay, so now let us see the types of soil we can understand. So how many types of soil we can understand in the environment? So the first form is silt, the second form is clay and coarse. Silt, clay and coarse. The fourth form is gravel. Okay, there will be 4 different types of soil forms: silt, clay, coarse and gravel. and this is the finest form of soil, silt soil. Clay is just a fine form. Okay, so this is finest form and this is fine form. Now, the next thing about the soil is how it is going to form, how it is going to originate. So, soil formation is the next thing. So remember again the pH factor. So which type of pH, which range of pH is very important in case of soil. So remember that is around 5.5 to 6.5. 5.5 to 6.5 range of pH. So slightly acidic. This is the normal pH range of soil where many living organisms are living. Okay, so very important point to remember the pH factor. So what is the range of pH means 5.5 to 6.5, slightly acidic in nature. So this range of pH is generally observed in many living organisms living soil. Okay, now the next thing is formation of soil. This is generally called as pedogenesis. Pedogenesis, which talks about the formation of soil or origination of soil. So weathering of rocks into soil. Weathering of rocks into soil, and this is again of three types: physical, chemical, biological. So the pedogenesis talks about weathering of rocks into soil, and this process is again of three types as physical, chemical and biological. So under physical, excess amounts of heat, okay, high temperatures, excess amount of heat hitting the rocks, then cool. Okay, so excess heat, extreme temperatures hitting the rocks, and again cool. On cooling, what happens? Rocks show breaking. Rocks show breaking. So that leads to the soil formation. Then the second process, chemical process. Here, under chemical process, acid rains. Acid rains, which degrade the rocks. Acid rains degrade the rocks, and toxic substances released by several living organisms. Toxic substances released by several living organisms. So acid rains and toxic substances released by several living organisms under chemical process, weathering of rocks leads to the formation of soil. And biological, growth of lichens on the rocks. Okay, so generally we call them as primary invaders. Okay, so these lichens, they will be growing on the small gaps of rocks, and they will be releasing something called as lichenolic acid, and that lichenolic acid will be acting on the rocks, and rocks are converted into soil. Okay, so these are the three different methods how pedogenesis takes place. Then the next important point is humidification. So under humidification, it talks about addition of organic matter to the soil. Addition of organic matter to the soil. So here several bacteria and other some types of microbes like fungi, etc., bacteria, fungi, etc. So they decompose the organisms, dead bodies or decaying materials, and that leads to the addition of organic matter to the soil, and this process is considered as humification. Okay, so soil should be enough of nutrition, right? Soil is a reservoir of nutrition. Then only plants which grow in the nutrient rich soil, we can get nutrient full values of plants, right? So that is the importance of humification here. Addition of organic matter by decomposition of dead bodies and some decaying materials by different types of microbes like bacteria and fungi. Okay, so this is about soil. So in total we discussed all the 4 abiotic factors and how they are getting interacted with the living organisms. So we discussed about temperature, light, water and also soil. Okay, so I will conclude here. In the next class we will be discussing, we will be starting response to abiotic factors.